Stampers, this is Kim with Great Inspirations. Thank you so much for joining me today. I thought we might make a fun fold card together. And the fun fold card I've chosen to make today, I call an envelope flaps fun fold. And I call it this because when you open the card, both ends sort of look like envelope flaps, to me anyway. So that's what I call this card. And as you can see by these three examples, there are different things you can do with this fun fold. For example, on this one, I made it a card with a belly band. And then you can open it up, and there's your message inside. And you put the belly band back on when you're wanting to close your card. Then for this one, I simply changed the orientation from portrait to landscape, dropped my greeting down a little, and there's the inside message. Then on this one, I just left as is. I put my pansies on the front, a little happy birthday there, and then when you open it, another message. So let's walk through what we need to do to make this fun fold. On my coordinating blog post, which there will be a link to in the description of this video, I've included two charts. This one, which tells you how to cut your cardstock for your card base, where to score, where to measure, and where to cut. I've also done the same thing for the pattern paper, or as I call it, the designer series paper that goes on the front flaps of the card. It's right here. Again, it tells you where to measure and to cut to get this nice angled cut for your card. So, what are we going to need to make the card base? We're going to need a piece of cardstock that is 11 inches by 5.5 inches. Now you don't have to worry about any of this because all those measurements and the list of supplies will be on that coordinating blog post. But we are going to score this, and I know it will be hard to see the score lines, but it is scored at 3 3/8 inches and 7 5/8 inches. And then we're going to have two pieces of designer series paper. There we go. And these measure 3 1/8 by 5 1/8. And then you need, for the inside, a piece of, I have basic white, that is 4 1/4 by, no, I'm sorry, 4 by 5 1/4 inches. That's just for your inside panel. So we will just walk through making this card base. It's really easy, nothing to get excited about, but we are going to need some type of measuring device that has 1 inch on it. Now, you can use, if you don't want to use a ruler and you happen to have grid paper, you can use the grid paper. And all we need to do on the 5.5 inch sides of our card base is measure from the bottom corner up 1 inch and make a mark. Then we just need to measure from the top point here down 1 inch. So this is 5.5, so we go down to 4.5 for our 1 inch. Then we're going to flip it and do the exact same thing on the other side. So we're going to measure it at and mark it at 1 inch, and then go to the top and come down 1 inch. So there's all the measuring we need to do for the card base. Now we need to get out the trimmer and we're going to do a little cutting. And all we need to do is line up our mark that we made. Put this in on the cutting line and line the mark we made up with the score line right in the cutting line and cut. Now we just do the same thing on the other side. Line up the mark, line up the score line, and cut. There's one side of our card base complete. Now we'll do this side. Our mark and the score line. And then one more time. We'll line up the mark and the score line. And there's our card base. And now we'll just take an eraser, erase any pencil marks that happen to be left. I don't like that end of that eraser very well. Let's try that again. That's a little better. And we'll get this one off and that little bit right there. And then we just fold along our score lines. And you'll want to use your bone folder. And there's the card base. And now we'll cut the Designer Series paper. It's sort of the same process, but what I do, you want to be aware of your pattern. If you have a certain pattern on your paper that is directional. And what I do, it's like, okay, this is going to be the left-hand side of the front of my card, and this is going to be the right-hand side. So I put them right here, left and right. And I know that I need to cut, the marks need to go on the inside. So I'm going to flip this, get my pencil, and mark at 1. That's 1 inch up, just like we did for the card base, and then 1 inch down from the top. And since this is 5 1/8, I will go to 4 1/8. Right there. So we have our 2 marks on that piece. And now I know that this is my inside. So I need to put this side against my grid or my ruler. And mark at 1. And then 4 1/8. And then it's just a matter of getting that trimmer out again. But this time we don't have a score line, so we're going to match up our mark with the opposite corner of the paper. Get that in there just a little bit better. There we go. And then we do the same thing at the bottom. Make sure that's my score line. Match it up with the opposite corner. And cut. Then we take our next piece. We find our mark right here. Line it up with the opposite corner and cut. And then again, we find our mark. That pencil mark is a little difficult to see with this green on the paper here. But I think we found it. Lined it up and cut it, and we're good to go. And we're done with that trimmer. We can bring our card base back in. And these will go just like this. So we'll get that adhesive. Line it up. There we go. Then we just have one more side. There we go. And now all we need to do is put our, kind of knocking everything over here, put our inside panel in. Then, of course, you can put any greeting and any other die cuts or whatever you would care to put on the front and on the inside to kind of dress it up a bit. But that is how you make that envelope flaps fun fold. I'll bring these cards back in. This is the one that is oriented in a landscape manner, and this one is the portrait orientation, as is this one. Now on this one I used 2 stamp sets. Well, actually on both of these I used 2 stamp sets. Courage and Faith is a new stamp set. It is in the current Stampin' Up! Annual catalog. And then for the inside sentiment on both of these cards, I used a stamp set that was in last year's catalog, but it's also in the current annual catalog, and that is Hope and Prayer. I'll just put this right back on here. And then for this card with the pansies, I used a stamp set that's been around a couple years, but it's still in the annual catalog. It's called Pansy Patch. And I used the coordinating dies to make my arrangement here on the front of this birthday card. So there we go. That is how you can make an envelope flaps fun fold. And once again, all the information for how to make this card and all the cutting measurements and the supply list and pictures of the charts and all that stuff can be found on my coordinating blog post. And that link will be found in the description of this video. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, stamp happy!